So we got a little time on this saw now, and it seems a little bit on the lean side just by feel. Hey, you know, maybe that's just how it runs, you know. And I really don't like what I did with that muffler. I really have to do something different there. When I put the full wrap on with the big bucking spikes, it'll be better. But the way it is now, I end up having to work around that, which is one of the cardinal sins in my mind for modification. It really needs to be off that direction more. And I'm either just going to work around it for a little bit because it runs really good. The saw does run good. Or I'm going to get pissed off and change it. So, just for due diligence, I think I need to... See, I don't like that. You see it right there? That's bothering me. And that is going to show up as a lean condition. See that hole right there? If that's beginning to arc to the cases, that will actually show up as a lean condition. It'll also limit the RPMs. And that might be what it is I'm feeling too, right there, once in a while. So I need to wrap that better, I think. And I think I need a fuel filter. So these are the things, you know, you go back through your build and start taking your, you know, initial impressions and feelings and translating them into things to look. So what I'm going to do is do a compression check just to make sure this thing is picking up compression. Then I'm going to wrap that some, and then I'll probably go run it for a while, and hopefully I can bring it down to the dealer and have them do a readout with Common Service Tool, so I have some numbers to look at and see whether or not some of my speculation on how it's running pans out with the operation history report from Common Service Tool. Something that any dealer will do if you ask them, I'm pretty sure. So what the heck can I wrap that with? That's all the way through. That's got to be affecting the performance right there. That plug wire. So, well, let me see what I got for compression. I'm not going to bore you with pulling. I'll just pull at it and then I'll show you the numbers. The compression is 180. That's about what I wanted. That's about as high as I want to go too. And that's a good number. And that's what I'm getting out of the pop-up piston. So that means that the cylinder and the basic internals are fine. Right? Look at that. That's like the perfect spark plug. So when you look at those two parameters, compression and the mixture, this saw is spot on. But I still feel like there's something a little bit off, and I'm going to guess it's because of that right there. My guess is that's going to show up at idle and possibly top RPMs. And what will happen in idle, if it starts firing through, starts skipping, you know, sparks, the carburetor is going to try to lean out just a little bit in order to get the RPMs up, which would correspond to what I'm feeling. And then of course at top end, this is going to be kind of like a a rev limiter is my guess. But actually I'm quite happy with what I'm seeing in the spark plug. That's just perfect. That means it's healthy. That along with the compression, man, that's good stuff. That's what you want to see. And one of the things that happens when you start getting old, goofy stuff starts coming to mind. And I have to tell you, I threw that saw in the back of the truck, jumped in here, and the first song that came to my mind is from The Wizard of Oz. Off to see the wizard. Oh man. Of course, most of the people who'd watch that video, or the one I'm doing right now, that would never come to mind because they probably never heard of it and never saw it. It's kind of hokey. So, anyway, see if CNY will give me a read. Well, went and got my readout on the saw. These guys, they actually know what they're doing. They got a good tech in there. So for all those folks who are kind of retracing my steps that can drive to Central New York, here's a place that can do your Common Service Tool work for you. Get you the printouts and things. This is where we're at. Well, I found that there is a part of the insulation on the plug wire which is pretty much worn all the way through. It's not good. And I was wondering whether or not that might be one of the reasons why I sort of felt a little bit lean on the low side. And I think I lost a few RPMs on the high side. I've got a data sheet that pretty much confirms that feeling. This is going to be a Common Service Tool story because I did go down and have those guys take a quick look at it just to verify things. And I did find some interesting little anomalies, but this is all part of the due diligence I talk about when you're trying to develop a build, you know, from a junk pile. There's a bunch of other things in the mix that you also have to look at. So I think the ones with blue, they're sold, but these other ones here, I think I can block them up. I may have to leave that one, but I think I can block up this stuff right here. I don't think that's going anywhere. So what I was going to do is just put some, you know, relatively hard time on it and block some of this stuff up here. And let me see, this might be a saw log. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, that's a saw log. I think that one is too, so I got to leave those two pieces alone. Oh boy, but I can block up this other stuff. That ought to eat up a tank of gas. So, and I got some more up here to work on. So I just need some material, raw material to run the saw on, and see whether or not putting that piece of rubber right there makes a difference on how that saw runs, you know. Let's see if that did anything. And also, this could be plugged, even though it looks good. I've seen these things where they're plugged, and that would account for the low side being lean. I like to see them right smack in the middle of the 70s. The larger the number, the longer the little solenoid stays closed in that carburetor, which means there's a little bit less fuel. So the net is, the bigger the number, the leaner the carburetor feels like it needs to be, and the lower the number, the fatter it needs to be. And with the open muffler that I have on that, I would have expected that the numbers would have dropped, but they didn't. Now, here's the other thing. When you start adding compression, and this is actually a good discussion. I mean, you can do the math if you want. There's all kinds of books out there and theory about the efficiency of the burn. For me, a work saw, the sweet spot's about 175 to 180, and this one's dead on 180. Well, what happens is, and it's like one of those bell curves where there's a gain, there's a maximum amount, and then you get more, it begins to drop, and this is what happens with the compression. There's a sweet spot where you get the most amount of energy of the burn turned into rotational motion, otherwise the most efficiency possible. And you increase the compression a little bit, the efficiency goes up, which means the need for fuel goes down, right? And I wouldn't have thought that by changing the compression based on the experience I had with the 562s, you'd see very much change in common service tool and its need to fuel the saw. Usually the compression doesn't do much. It might actually go the other way for that matter. But when you open up the exhaust and you let a lot more flow go through, usually that means you need more fuel, and I'm not seeing that on this particular saw. But having said that, I'm not seeing it get to max RPMs either. And I have a hunch that has to do with the ignition system sending sporadic information. And that's what this little exercise is about. Let's see if my theory is correct. That wire being compromised the way it is alters the way the saw runs. And then Autotune, yet again, has found a way to compensate so that me as an operator, can't really tell. And I think that's the other point, is it's another set of data I don't know that I would have looked for. This saw runs good. Maybe when I started doing back-to-back cuts with a 565, and maybe it wouldn't be quite as, overwhelmingly better, and that might have made me look a little closer. The fact is, it runs freaking strong right now, just the way it is, even with that compromised ignition wire. And even though Autotune has reported some goofy numbers. And like I said, the high side is really not that far off, other than the max RPMs. It's off. It should be a few hundred RPMs more. and of course the low side is quite lean the way it's set right now. And if that wire is shortened to the side and you're losing spark, it might lean the carburetor to try to get the RPMs up at idle for sure. But also it may not be able to rev past a certain point. I've seen this on the 61s where I get to have that plug wire from the 61 ignition wrap up over a 272 cylinder, and all of a sudden you don't get the RPMs because it's shortened to the cylinder. I think I'm having a little bit of that scenario happening with this saw. And then when I did my test on this, I didn't see it when I was running it. I checked the compression, bang on 180. It looks beautiful inside the exhaust, so there's nothing happening bad on the inside of that saw. The guts are fine. And of course the spark plug was a perfect tan. So if you were just using conventional tools to evaluate that saw, you know, the vac test, compression test, you know, looking at the spark plug, you probably would miss it unless you're really, really tuned into how these things run, which I kind of am. So I sensed that there was something a little bit off, and then Common Service Tool basically confirmed, and now we're into that cycle of trying to figure out what it is, and I did find that ignition wire. So now that I've said that 3 times 4 different ways, let's put some runtime on this saw, fire it up and see what it does. I wasn't planning on doing video type things. I don't have my standard video tools, of course. I had no intentions of doing a video today. I was pretty much done with video yesterday. So I don't have my tripod or none of that kind of thing. So anyway, let's see if this fires up. You know, it's warmer yet again today than it was yesterday. I just can't believe what I'm feeling here in January, central New York. Let's see if it restarts now without going to high idle. So what I'm seeing is not a quantum change to the actual power, and throttle response is still there because it was before, but it feels like I got a couple more RPMs, and that might be simply because the ignition is not shorting out. But the biggest change that I can tell in the way it's running today versus yesterday is when it's off idle, like when you have the bar on a log and you just pull the trigger. Yesterday it fell right on its face every time, and today it doesn't. So it's beginning to pull the bar through. Like if I stick the bar through a cut that I've done when I'm noodling, yesterday I had to sort of wiggle around and finesse it to get it come back on RPMs, and today I don't have to. So getting that plug wire out of that slot, getting that plug wire's insulation away from the cases has made a small change. You know, one that's actually noticeable since I'm looking for it. And again, I mean, this is the kind of thing that a person probably would not find just doing a standard run, compression, leak down test, stuff like that. And a lot of guys would have left that plug wire right alone. You know, it runs, leave it alone. But when you have a tool like Common Service Tool that gives you a clue that something's not quite right, it kind of gives you a reason to go step in, look just a little further. And I'm kind of glad I did, because you know, I kind of felt it. You know, I figured it just needed to break in more. That was my explanation yesterday. But now I actually can hone in and understand that part of what's going on is that plug wire is shorting out against the case. And so now I have to either decide to buy a new ignition, find a way to stabilize that plug wire more, or do something like that. I think I'll just figure out how to wrap it and run it. And but I'll tell you what, 180 pounds of compression, feels good on that saw. And I think the other thing I'm finding pretty interesting is with that saw is just the throttle response is just instantaneous. I just like it.